Here we are, the 8th Digital Ethics Summit for Tech UK. Really grateful to have you here, Kelly, from the US. So thank you so much for joining us for this conversation, fireside, but also the panel later on, Meet the AI Ethicist. So Dr. Kelly Trindle, Chief Responsible AI Officer at Workday. We're going to be asking you 5 questions today. Just get a steer on your practitioner. You know, it's developing really fast, and just clarity on your background, the skill set, and kind of what we might see in the future for the space. So starting with your background and your journey, a bit about how you came to be Chief Responsible AI Officer and what kind of pivots happened in your life that landed you here.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me. I'm really grateful to be here and have this conversation with you today. So my background, I was trained as a social scientist, so a psychologist specifically. And that really reflects my just curiosity and interest in people and how people interact with social stimuli. If you think about AI systems as socio-technical systems, it really clicks in terms of like my interest and kind of what led me to it. But once I left academia, I actually went to work for the US federal government for an agency that enforces civil rights laws, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. And that's where I was really focused on fairness and bias and anti-discrimination, specifically around employment selection systems. And so towards the end of my time at the EEOC, I started to see AI employment selection systems. Like it was very early, but I started to hear about them and kind of see them in their infancy. And that led me to think about, okay, so we do this special kind of analysis when it's an employment system. What about when it's an AI employment system? Is it the same? Is it different? What kind of challenges does that bring? So that was an entry point. Then I went to work for a startup for a while in the AI and hiring space, which gave me a very practical understanding of the systems. Yeah. And that was a real turning point for me to take from the academic and government angle to applied angle and understand the different challenges. And then I went to Workday, and first I was working in public policy, which then I got to learn about, you know, the very beginnings of the EU AI Act. And in the States, we look at the NIST AI risk management framework quite a bit, and really bringing together my sort of social science, practical grounding, and then what do we do about these regulations? How do we make it work? So that's what led me to this role.
What a tool belt. You know, you have the government, you have the private sector, you have the academia. That's incredible. And I mean, out of curiosity, what is the day-to-day look like? You know, the Monday to Friday.
Sure.
What is behind the scenes of what it means to be a responsible AI practitioner?
Yeah, well, it's really actually, I've been in this role now for about 3 years. We called it something different in the beginning, but it's been the same role. And early days, it was about building the team, because first it was just me, and it was a brand new function and a brand new thing. And so first I had to just define what it was. And then I started thinking about, you know, who do I need to bring on board in order to round this out and make a team that will really be able to meet the challenge. But daily now, I maintain our AI governance program at Workday. So that has to do with risk evaluation when products are being developed, AI products are being developed, and mitigations. And so day to day, there's maintaining that. There's dealing with edge cases, because there's always sort of new things that you didn't think of that come up. And so addressing edge cases, thinking about whether we need to make updates to our governance. There's a lot of customer conversations more and more, which is really interesting. There could be regulator conversations in a day, investor conversations, like folks who are investing in Workday want to know what we're doing in the space. So I get to talk to those kind of folks. And yeah, I mean, it varies, but it's really about maintaining the core, thinking about how to improve the core, and then a lot of comms, both internal to the company and outside the company.
Yeah, I want to just dig a bit deeper on skills.
Sure.
And just talk about like how, you know, again, your background, how in those day-to-day activities are you turning to skills from your, you know, PhD in psychology, or your time in government, or your time in the startup specifically, and then talking about building the team and kind of focusing there and getting the right skill set to surround you and support you. What kind of folk were you looking for? What skills do you see as really valuable when it comes to being a responsible AI practitioner?
Sure. So for me, it really was, it was like, okay, here's what I know how to do. And then what do we need to do for the company? And like, what am I missing? Frankly, like what skills don't I have? So my social science background includes some quantitative statistical analysis work, but I'm not really a data scientist. So my first move was, I know I need a data scientist. So I found a fantastic data scientist to start the team. And then I thought, all right, well, there's a certain kind of social scientist that's particularly focused on the workplace. In the US, we call them industrial organizational psychologists. Here, I think it's organizational psychologists. But I wanted to add that skill set to the team. Then there was, what about folks who actually know governance, like in other areas, like maybe not AI governance, but other areas within a corporate environment. So I added someone like that to the team. Then I realized I need an engineer. So it was an engineer.
Okay.
And then finally, it was really a focus on the training and comms, because we've actually built like a really nice program, but not everybody at the company knows about it. And that's very important to like make sure you have that kind of stakeholder engagement all across the org. People are trained up on what they need to know. People understand where to go for resources and such. So really it was, okay, here's what I know how to do. I have special expertise in the bias detection stuff that we talked about, but there's other areas that I'm just not so expert in, and let's make sure we bring those folks into the team is how I've built it.
That sounds like an incredible group of humans that can really get the job done. You've got the ethics, you've got the technical, and that ability to kind of translate between non-technical and technical folks as well. So,
and if you don't mind me just adding one point to that, I think one thing that unifies us, to your point about an incredible group, because I really am proud of this team, is just like a open-mindedness, or just an understanding that you have a piece and then there's other pieces, and we all learn from each other, and we have to constantly teach one another. And so I think folks have asked me, if I want to build a responsible AI team, what's the most important skill that they should share? And I would say just that lifelong learning. You're going to learn things being part of this
Non-stop.
team. You'll be better when you come away from it. It's going to keep going forever, myself included. So I just think that's really important.
Perfect. I just want to take the conversation in a bit of a different direction now, because, the space is growing. We need more responsible AI leads. We're seeing kind of the postings pop up. And we might have students come and knock on our door and ask, where do I go? How do I become a responsible AI officer? And it's not the same as when you're a lawyer and you have a very clear pathway. Career pathway. And so there's discussions on establishing standards and certification and these kinds of things. I'm curious about your thoughts on professionalizing AI ethics or professionalizing responsible AI.
Yeah, it's a really great question. I completely understand why you ask, because I think your first question I get a lot, because people say, how did you get here? I understand that there are people out there who are interested in the area and they want to figure out, what is the pathway to kind of get involved in such. I do feel like it's a little early in, the sort of history of this area of expertise to determine what it takes, to be qualified for this. I look back at the history of, my field of academia, psychology, and, first there were medicine and physical sciences experts who got, sort of founded the field. Then there were philosophers who came in and said, okay, but you need unifying theories, to think about what makes the whole person. Then there were statisticians who got involved. So it took quite a while before psychology was really a thing. And then once it was really a thing, then there were sort of separate tracks. What do you want to do? Is I'm not a clinical psychologist. I couldn't treat anyone because I didn't study that. I didn't focus on that. That wasn't my area of interest. So as much as I understand that there are folks who want to get involved, I do worry a little bit that, let's say, there might be a privacy organization that wants to do standardization. That's a specific spin on it. It's not the whole thing. And I'm not sure who could put together the whole thing. I think if it were possible, and if we weren't too early, and if I was wrong about that, I would just really zero in on the multidisciplinary. It's so multidisciplinary.
So interdisciplinary.
Yeah. And I mean, it gets to be more so, the deeper I get, the more I'm oh, okay, so now maybe I should be thinking about a UI expert, user interface kind of expert. Privacy, I didn't mention, but, should I have an attorney on my team? We could keep going.
Yeah. I mean, we all could just come from such varied backgrounds.
Exactly.
It's such a diverse group of us. So, it would be interesting to see how that develops. Final question for you.
Sure.
Looking forward, looking to the future, what do you kind of see the field evolving to in 3 to 5 years? So maybe your role itself, or again, kind of that meet the AI ethicist? Like,
Sure.
who might this look like? What might their tasks be in 5 years' time?
Yeah, so when I think about the future, first I'm humble because I know we don't really know what the future is going to look like.
That's right there.
But on top of that, I guess, as I mentioned with psychology, like when I look at the history of that field, I mentioned like there's sort of like an academic route, an applied route, in psych, there's a clinical route too. I would like to see the field kind of mature in that way, that some folks want to study the work and want to think about it in the context of research and academia, which is important and valuable. And I really appreciate folks that want to go in that direction.
Yeah.
Some folks really want to get into the business, where AI systems are developed and, sold and utilized and things like that. And they want to understand how these socio-technical systems work in a business and what's required there. And I really do feel like those are different. We need both. And so I don't know whether it's coming in the next 3 to 5 years, but eventually, as the field matures, I would be surprised if we didn't get to that point. And I think it's needed and important.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kelly Trindle. It has been such a lovely conversation. I'm looking forward to our panel shortly. And thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Really looking forward to see what comes next.
Yes, absolutely.
See you.
Thanks.